Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Vader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. Hey, podcast listeners, Jason here. In this episode, I had the opportunity to speak with Bill Morse. Up until recently, Bill was the owner of Constar Supply out of Clovis, California. And let me tell you something. I've known Bill a number of years, and he is the most easygoing, mellow business owner I probably ever met. You know, he's just got this terrific philosophy, and really nothing really seems to rattle the guy. So I enjoyed speaking with him, and I hope you enjoy listening to this episode. This episode of Distribution Talk is sponsored by InSQL Distribution Software. InSQL is a fully functional distribution-based software package. I only recommend software packages that were purpose-built to serve distribution, and these folks do it very well at a price point many smaller distributors can afford. Economy doesn't mean compromise. This company is on the cutting edge of distribution-friendly applications like VMI on mobile devices, mobile signature capture, mobile CRM, warehouse management software, and e-commerce development. If you're ready to step up to a fully loaded, scalable distribution package at an affordable price, look no further than InSQL Distribution Software at www.insql.com. That's INXSQL.com. Hey, Bill, thanks for joining the show.
My pleasure, Jason. Nice seeing you.
Nice seeing you as well. Hey, as you know, on Distribution Talk, we like to jump back into the very beginnings of your career. And how did you get started with Constar Supply? But maybe even let's go a little bit further back than that.
Okay. You're going back to dinosaur days, Jason. You know that.
I probably am, sir. Yes.
And it's funny that the timing, I was just adding up the years the other day. I started in 1979. That's when I accidentally got into this industry. Company in town called R.J. Waite. It was the only game around. I was going to college and needed a part-time job, and that's where I ended up. Sort of fast forward from there, the two guys that worked there at R.J. Waite, the general manager, purchasing agent, took off on their own about maybe 7 or 8 years after I started working there and started their company called Stop Supply. So I gave it a few years at R.J. Waite and moved over to Stop Supply with them and worked for them for a number of years until they sold out to Whitecap, and that was the big changeover to big corporation. I'd always thought about having my own business anyway. So in 1997, I started Constar. And so that's how the whole back history before Constar was R.J. Waite and then Stop Supply.
So you left Stop Supply. What were you doing at Stop Supply before you decided to make the leap? What was your role there?
Okay, so for them, I'd already gone through the ranks. I had been inside manager, operations manager, purchasing, general manager at R.J. Waite, and then I moved over to Stop Supply and was their general manager. So pretty much overseeing everything. They were sort of seat of the pants type people. I added a little bit of structure to Stop Supply, brought in some technology, got them on computer system and whatnot. So it sort of grew that company forward with what I had learned in school. And that was a big plus for them because they were from the old school that you wrote hand tags and everything was done with a cup of coffee and a cigarette and a handshake. And we just moved it forward a little bit.
Gotcha. When you left Stop and you moved over, did you go over with partners? Did you do it yourself? I mean, I hate to say it, kind of that dream of saying to your boss, hey, take this job and shove it, and I'm going to move on and start my own gig. But a lot of folks don't know how to finance that, and they don't realize all the steps necessary and all the things you have to do to really make that dream a reality.
No, that's exactly right. Yeah, there were more steps than I thought. I'd always thought about owning my own business. I always wanted to. I started digging into it. I have a friend that was in banking. I talked to him about it. He said, yeah, you can get small business loans. Pretty much whatever you put in, they'll match for you. And I started just doing the numbers. And I said, this is going to be a tough road because it's capital intensive to get into this industry. So I went to the guy that was a controller at the time at Stop Supply. And I said, you know what, I'm thinking about this. And so he sort of helped me put together a business plan. And then he said, do you want a partner? And I said, if you got any money. And he said, I've got a little bit. So that was sort of a plus. So we started talking about a partnership. And as we got along, we were developing this business plan. And he said, do you think it's a go? Do you think it'll work? And I said, I'm pretty certain about it. The only thing I'm not sure of is I've been out of the sales end for quite a few years. I was in management. So a lot of my connections were not there anymore. And I said, we might want somebody from the sales side to be in this too. So the three of us ended up partnering in Constar Supply originally. There was somebody that was sort of tasked to do sales, somebody tasked to do administrative, which was the controller from Stop Supply, and then myself, which would run the whole operations part. And that was the beginning. That partnership lasted till about 5-6 years ago. Then I bought them out. So I had Constar the last 6 years.
By yourself,
Yeah, by myself.
Good. Well, I mean, it sounds like, you all made a pretty good run of it, though. I mean, let's face it, that's not the easiest thing. Partnering with folks, leaving the comfort of a paycheck from somebody else and striking out on your own.
Yeah.
Beyond the financial side, what were some of the biggest hurdles that you had to overcome in those first few years? What are those big challenges?
It's always personnel. I mean, the good and the bad of our success is that when we opened the doors, we had immediate success. The economy was good. People knew us. Local people supported us. So we had to start staffing up. That's always tough. Luckily, I had connections. I was able to pull some people away that had been in the industry a long time. So I didn't have to do a lot of training, but we did have to try and keep up with the pace of the business in the first days. People being the biggest challenge, inventories naturally, capitalizing yourself as you're growing. Those were anticipated, but we didn't know at what pace. And it started out really fast. So that was our challenge, just trying to keep up with that growth pace, which was over 25% each year for about the first 8 or 10 years. We're growing at 25%.
That's a very fast pace there. And difficult to finance, as you mentioned. That's one thing that a lot of people don't recognize is that they love, hey, I'm growing. But they don't understand that there's this tipping point. If you're growing faster than about 10%, typically, it's very difficult to self-finance that growth. Yeah. And so you have to find that financial partner. And again, with your partnership, that might have worked out well, but that's when you got to go out to the banking community and say, hey, I need a line of credit here. I need some help.
Yeah, that's what we ended up doing. Fortunately, I had a few connections there. I knew a few guys that were in banking. They sort of tutored me along. We made it work going through that, but that's definitely the biggest challenge. It's when you're successful like that, companies have gone out of business by being too successful. Just because they leverage themselves, they can't keep up with it, and pretty soon the numbers don't add up and down you go. We worked it real hard. We went to the banks. We moved banks 2 or 3 times in the early years because banks were wooing us back then, and we wanted to get as much as we can and keep the pace of growth going. So we were real active in that area.
Bill, just it kind of occurs to me, it sounds like one of those really key early on strengths or kind of early wins, things that you did really right were understanding how to develop banking relationships. And I think sometimes that's a mystery for a lot of people, especially, we come out of the, let's face it, come out of the construction trade, and we're selling tools and stuff like that. What do we know about bankers? And I think that it sounds to me, at least what you're sharing with me, is that is a really crucial step if someone wants to take on this endeavor.
Absolutely. And if you don't know it, or if you're not comfortable with it, or you just don't want to do it, find somebody that does, that's good at it, because that's essential. The fact that I had friends that were doing it, and Tom, my partner at the time, he was more an administrative guy and liked the detail and spending time and could do the paperwork associated with all that. But it's a key element of business, and you cannot overlook that. I'm a hands-on guy. I like being out there with the customers and being in front, and the banking part of it just bores me to this day. But you really, if you don't do it, you better ask somebody that can, because it's essential.
It's interesting that you say that. I think sometimes as business owners that people think that those banks are clamoring for your business and, they're trying to woo you, as you mentioned. But I think there's also a dynamic shift as well, that you have to sell yourself to that bank as well. And you have to sell your capabilities.
That's a good way of putting it too, Jason. I think in every business, whether you're a doctor, a professional, or just a contractor out there, you really are in some part salesman, and you have to sell your whole idea. That's a good way of putting it. We did that with the banks. We were really good at putting together a company profile. We were really good about going down and telling them our plans. We always had a 3-year forecast out there for them. Try to get ahead of the game, gain their trust. And if you don't sell yourself, they're not going to buy into it. The banks are, these days especially, banks are very tough. You really have to give them a real argument to go to bat for you.
It just kind of reminds me, a client I worked with a few years ago, that we talked about creating a PowerPoint presentation about what they saw in the next 2 years, where the company was going. And each time you have that kind of strategic thought, or you're looking at 2 to 3 years down the line, put together a little presentation and make sure that your bank gets to sit in on that.
Yeah.
It's part of the deal.
Don't discount the personal connections. One of the
Right.
banks that was real instrumental in our growth, I became golf buddies and friends with the banker. And he did some end rounds for us. And I know he did. And when we were going into a tougher economy, he was there to go to bat for us, because construction isn't a real high priority for banks when the economy gets tough, because they start throwing those guys away right and left.
Oh, yeah, I remember, the dark years, the 07, 08, 09, years there.
Yeah.
If you had contractor construction attached to your business, you were persona non grata at the banking community.
Yeah.
They didn't love you. And so a lot of folks found that all of a sudden the banking covenants got a lot tighter, and they let slide in the past. They didn't let slide. And
absolutely.
Yeah. And I think it's important that you understand that dynamic. I find that people think sometimes that, well, I'm the customer, they should be doing everything to me. And it's not the case. You must make sure that that bank is satisfied and kind of treat that as a sales relationship.
That's exactly right. One of the things that my banker talked to me about, which only registered after I talked to him, he said, the banks really aren't in the business anymore of taking risk, because they can put their money as investment money somewhere rather than putting it out as loan money. So the fact that I'm paying 5% on a line of credit or 6% on a line of credit is only of value if the risk is way low, because they can put them in overnight government bonds and make 3.5%. It was unusual. They used to call us a golden child, this one particular bank and banker. And we ended up being the last one in construction when the economy got bad. But they actually had two of us. One, it was a big contractor that they had to hold on to because he's in trouble. And then ourselves, who they were holding on to because we performed so well. But banks in general, at that point in time, we're talking 08, 7, 8, 9, they were just dumping anything to do with construction.
Absolutely.
It was a depressed industry.
It was definitely a difficult time. You made it through. You mentioned, again, though, early on, the challenge of finding qualified people. And I'm sure that's a current challenge for everybody. But Tell me, what did you all do early on? And maybe share with us, what you do now to try to find the right people.
So there's probably a few steps to go through. There's a lot of opportunity now to find employees. There's a big difference between finding an employee and finding the right one. We always try and match the employee up to the opening we have. One of the things I've always said is, let's find the right employee. Let's not go find an MBA or somebody that's overqualified to be in inside sales for a construction supply company. So match them up properly. And what we did, and especially in the early days we had good luck with, is it was people I knew, friends, and then you find friends of friends. So if you have a real quality employee, you can somewhat figure that he's got quality friends. So we did that in the early days, and we were real successful. We would find, let's say, a salesman, and he was really performing, and then your buddies need a job. I'm guessing that if you have this work ethic, you're hanging around with some people that have a similar work ethic. And it really worked. To this day, our base and our employees is all people who've been here a long time. And you've been around our operation, you know them. They're quality guys. And then a lot of the other people that have come on since our early days have been friends of friends. They go out and they find one of their good friends and they say it's a nice place to work, and they take care of you. And pretty soon you have another one over here.
You made just a great point there, Bill, that good employees tend to hang out with other people who are going to be probably good employees. It's that birds of a feather, type of thing flocking together. But so I've always tried to help companies understand, or distributors understand, that they really want to tap into their current employees for referrals. Find out, hey, all of them have a friend. Now, there's going to be some friends that they don't want to refer over to you. We all have those friends out there. But I think that really developing that internal referral network is probably one of the strongest things you can do to develop a good team.
Yeah. We have a program in place right now, as a matter of fact, through the new corp, to reward that. If you bring somebody over here and introduce them to the company and we end up employing them, you get a $250 bonus. It sort of keeps that in everybody's mind. Everybody, at least they're thinking about it. Okay, there's an opening in purchasing. okay, I might go out and find somebody for them and make a little money myself. So there's that extra incentive. But in general, if you find the right people, they know somebody. They might run into somebody else at the Starbucks that's really qualified that you didn't know. So it's just networking. That's what you're getting down to.
That's funny, Bill. You mentioned Starbucks. And, I think you and I have talked about this over the years about those folks who know your name. When you go in, the barista looks at, hey, Bill, and knows what you're looking for. That's the type of person, though. Could you imagine having in your own business? And from a customer service standpoint, that's that magic person. And so I think sometimes when we're looking for those right candidates, we've got to look away from our particular industry niche and say, hey, who is really good in that customer service standpoint?
Yeah. And again, we've talked about it. Customer service is customer service. And you can be a barista, you can be a construction supplier, you can be any other industry. If you show a concern for people and are proud of your product, it'll come through and you'll be great selling whatever you do. One of the things I've found in the past too is sometimes going out and picking up somebody in your own industry that's already established himself and you think might be a good catch is not, because you have to reprogram them. You take the Starbucks employee as an example. He'll come over, knows nothing about your industry. You get to start fresh. You tell him, here's what it's about. Use those same skills as you did on me, driving through your drive-thru every day, and go sell a saw blade or something else. What I've found in the past, and having done this enough times and redone it plenty, is that sometimes you go out and you'll find the veteran that knows the products and thinks they know the market, and you got to take the bad habits out of them, reprogram them. So there are successes there too, but there's two ways of looking at it. These days, I like the young, energetic employees that come over there with wide eyes and are all ears, and you teach them real quick and they pick it up real quick and off they go.
Yeah. And I think younger people, they get a little knock on them for having certain habits that maybe are not as agreeable, or let's just say they're less comfortable for those of us past a certain vintage, but still, you're right. Sometimes when you try to hire within your industry, you can pick up either bad habits or somebody who is a little too set in their ways. And maybe there'll be a cultural mismatch, when they come and try to work with you, even though, hey, they were a rock star elsewhere, but they just don't seem to fit your team.
Yeah, if they come from big corporations, they have a different mindset, and everything in that world is very structured. Your job description is very narrow. So that's what I've run up against there. Getting back to the youth and hiring young people too, I tend to be the drumbeat these days for young people. Everybody says they're not the way they used to be, and that's usually old folks talking about reminiscing back and wanting it to be like it was 40 years ago. We found some great young people, and we've gone through a few to find them. And the overall comment may be correct that, maybe overall as a group, they don't have the work ethic that they did, but we found some really good ones. And when you do, you're out ahead of everybody else, because then you've got the cream of the crop and they perform, and their competition isn't that stiff.
Right. And I applaud, because I've seen some of the young people that you've brought into that organization, and the longevity that they've had in that company. Shifting gears just a little bit more towards those managing of salespeople. I think this tends to be kind of another one of those employee-based issues that's always been a challenge for people. And so you've always had some good philosophies around that. If you wouldn't mind, share a couple of those.
Managing as salespeople is more about what you don't say than what you say. And what I mean by that is that a good outside salesman is pretty independent type A personality. And the more you try and manage that or try and regulate that, the less effective they'll be. So when they're out there, you have to really weigh some of the things they're doing that you might want to change versus the outcomes of what they're doing. And if the outcomes of what they're doing are really good, then just let the little stuff go. I don't put our salesmen on call reports. I don't track them. I don't hold them down. I don't give them too many barriers to making a sale. I look at the overall numbers. We talk about numbers every month. We talk about numbers at the end of the year. So we're focused on that. But I found that about the time you start talking to them about taking off at 3 p.m. or where you going here, you're also stifling that energy that's going to go out and get it done because you're letting them have their freedom. That's with the outside sales group. The inside sales group are similar. You just give them a lot of praise and let them be a little different than the guy standing next to them. They don't have to do it exactly the same. They have to fall within the range, of what you've set up for a company, but let them be a little independent. We don't have strict uniforms here. We make them wear the green of Constar, and some of them wear collared shirts, some of them wear T-shirts, but that's letting them be themselves. So when you do that, you do get the rewards of that, which is somebody that's happy with their job and not feeling like they're being held down for any reason.
Definitely. One of the things you mentioned earlier about that type A personality or a very independent streak, especially in outside, and really, and to some degree, you've got inside salespeople in that as well. Yeah, allowing them that flexibility and that leverage. I mean, I think there's a lot of talk sometimes about standardization. You try to standardize this, standardize that. I really don't think that is a smart play when it comes to managing some of these outside sales representatives, that they do need that latitude. Again, with you're painting some boundaries, but those are pretty loose boundaries there.
Right. I'll tell you a little story. Years ago, one of the bigger competitors we had, I say because we kicked their ass, and I put them in the history books now. They came in here to buy or borrow something from us for a customer one day. And we were outside talking. He was a guy that we'd formerly worked with. And one of our outside salesmen was out there, and I was out there. And I know that his company had contacted this particular salesman I was with out there about a job numerous times. And so as we were sitting out there talking to him, I noticed he had a little device on the top of his truck. And I said, well, what's that? Like a light, or what's on top of your truck? He goes, well, they got us on GPS now so they can track us. And I go, they don't trust you, I guess, huh? He goes, well, no, I don't know if it's not trusting you, but everybody has to do it. And I said, well, that's because they don't trust you. And so me and my salesman were there. And the word we got across to him, I didn't offer at the time, but the salesman ran into him later and said, the good thing about our company is that Bill trusts me. He doesn't have to put that on top of my car or my truck because he knows by my numbers and I'm out there doing it for him. And I told him I would, and he believed me. And that guy, that salesman, was looking for a job about 3 months later and came to us because he liked the idea. And we sort of pointed out to him that it's not a big deal, but in a way it is, because they're a size company. They have to do that. They have some bad apples, and they're going to weed out those bad apples. And we weed them out by working side by side with hard workers. We don't let anybody around here get away with it being a slacker because the peer pressure just buries them.
Right. We eat what we kill here. That's exactly really what we do.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, you've had a transition with Constar. You were the owner of the whole thing, and now you've made a little bit of change. Would you mind sharing a little bit about what happened and what were some of the thoughts leading up to that decision?
Well, that's a great question. Being in business 20 years with Constar, we've had numerous people come to us and ask if we were ready to sell. Once I started getting to a certain age, I started thinking a little more about it. And then I had to come up with a plan. I had to say, something's got to happen. I've got to do an employee buyout. I've got to consider some of these offers, or I've got to at least put a plan in my head. So I started doing that a couple of years ago. And sure enough, people started calling. Fast forward, we got in contact with some construction supply group. Their members are a lot like us. That was one of the keys to my decision in doing it, was to make sure that when we transitioned, we were going to a company that was like us, not a different industry, not somebody that operated differently. So I went ahead and went forward with that, and it's worked out really well. It's going to be a pretty big company, but they've broken it up into regions, and then they've left each individual market alone. So since September, which is when we brokered the deal with them, we've pretty much stayed the same. As far as my own job, I still have the same responsibilities. I think I'm working a little harder now because I have reporting to do. I've got a good group of guys, and I pretty much, as you know, could walk away and go golfing or whatever I wanted to do in the past. And I can still do that. It's just that I got to finish my reports first and get some of this stuff out of it. It's important to make the right choice. Going into this, I had 3 people I was looking at as potential buyers, and I chose this one, and I'm pretty sure it was the right choice.
And what I know about that company and some of the leadership that I've known over the years around that company, I think you did make a good choice. They don't seem to be too heavy-handed at this point, and they're not trying to micromanage you. And I mean, they're going to hold you to some standard, but it's a good thing. I mean, you were a very strong entity coming into that relationship. So it's not like this is any new great performance expectations. I mean, you kind of already been there. So I think it was a good fit for you all going forward.
Well, and you know what it is, and it doesn't matter if you're independent, if you're a small company, if you're part of a bigger company, it's all about performance. And I had that conversation with the whole group here, and with the sales force, I'm reinforcing it every day. If you perform, it's easy. If you're part of a big group and you're in the bottom 10%, you're going to get looked at a lot, whatever level you're at. And so I said the key to making your job environment fun is perform. Just go out there every day and do what you've been doing for the last dozens of years of your life and put up the numbers, and everything's going to work out fine.
Well, good. Well, we're kind of coming to the close of our time here together. Is there anything that you would give a distributor, a newer distributor kind of coming in, just kind of one big piece of advice, one kind of last parting shot? What would you tell that person as they're maybe having one of those tough days out there?
Yeah. Well, the industry's changing, as you know, Jason. Mm-hmm. It's consolidating. It's tougher to enter this industry anymore as I did. I got in just at the right time, about the time the economy was taking off and it was still doable. You could get into this with a smaller amount of money and not the big competitors you have now. But I think what we were just talking about is key. Put together a good company, give everybody their own personality and let them run with it. And then just go out and perform. And it doesn't matter if you were part of the big corporations and running billions through the books or you're just a smaller one, you still have to go out there every day and make it work. In our industry, it's all about personal relationships. So if you want to get in the sales industry and construction supply, you go out there and work hard and treat these people right, give them what they need and make money for them on their job. And that's still the formula that's going to work. It was my formula 40 years ago, and I'll still stand by it.
All right, fair enough. All right, well, my friend, thank you so much.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider hitting that subscribe button. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area on your podcast application or at www.distributiontalk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by Andrea Klunder and Edwin Ruiz at the Creative Imposter Studios. This episode was brought to you by my company, The Distribution Team. We are a consulting services firm dedicated to helping wholesale distribution clients remove barriers to profitability, generate wealth, and achieve personal goals. To learn more about how we can help your company succeed, check us out at www.thedistributionteam.com.